All right, grace and peace to the body. I want to thank everybody who's going to be listening to this live stream. Your time is definitely precious to you and it's important, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this. My guest is Jeremy, and I'll let him spend like a minute or two and explain what his position is, what he believes, why he believes what he believes. And then from there, we'll just kind of start getting into the topic of the book of Daniel. There's no real set program or outline for tonight's discussion, so we'll just kind of just let the conversation go where it goes. So, Jeremy, go ahead and introduce yourself, and I appreciate you coming on. And I will say this real quick. I apologize. It is hard for me to find Adventists who want to come on here and talk in a live, respectful conversation. So I have a lot of respect for you just willing to do this. So I do appreciate that, Jeremy.
No, I'm actually thankful to you for letting me participate. Actually, I consider myself a little bit more of a attendee rather than someone who's going to participate a lot. Mainly because I am not quite. Um, I'm not the kind of person who regularly gives Bible studies. I consider I'm still learning. Although I've been told that I already know a little bit, but I I I, I shy away from this sort of events. Actually, this is the first time that I participate in something like this, so I'm somewhat nervous about it. But some of my background, well, I was raised Catholic. Actually, I'm from Costa Rica, so Catholicism is very heavy here. So that's all I knew for over 22, 23 years. Later on, I became an atheist. I stopped believing everything. I hung out with the wrong kind of people, so I became somewhat rebellious towards the Lord. I stopped believing, but in this with these people, you eventually learn to say things that, well, now I regret quite deeply. Uh, Eventually, through a period of time when I was learning of occultism, actually, I came to realize that there is actually a spiritual world, and I little by little I grew convinced that there was something else. It for me it wasn't really God. I passed from these new age groups. I didn't participate, but I was following some YouTube channels. That's mainly how I learned about this, and I was finding a lot of new age channels and practices and their beliefs, and quite some weird stuff happened to me, and I came to believe, and there is something spiritual, something going on. But some of these folks would use the Bible, actually, some verses of the Bible to justify some of their beliefs, but somehow they would not reconcile uh, the Jew beliefs or the Christian beliefs. So they would twist it quite a lot. So I started to read the Bible over and over, and while I used to read it when I was younger, something like 13 or 14 years old, uh, I never read the, for example, Isaiah, which was one of the when I read it again, but when I started to read the Bible again, I had started to read by Isaiah, which was something I never did. So I was curious to learn what was saying there. And when I came to Isaiah 53, of course, and especially for me, especially 55, Isaiah 55, I could find Jesus in those verses, which was very shocking for me because I was, as I mentioned, uh, quite anti-Christian. I hated Jesus. I must be quite frank about this. But when I started to read over and over and over Isaiah 53 and 55, 55 particularly, I couldn't stop believing there was a Jesus guy in heaven. And I started to find something new in Christianity. I started to review it. I couldn't go back to Catholicism because I just simply couldn't. But I tried several Protestant movement and religions, uh, but somehow none of them could convince me. I wasn't quite comfortable with some of their beliefs. At some point, after attempting in several churches and several denominations, I told the Lord, "Well, sir, Lord, if you are real, I want to know what's the real deal. I mean, I am, I've tried seriously tried to seek for the truth, and I am just really tired of searching. I am sick. I was really sick, mentally sick, and physically sick, and I told him, "All right, I'm gonna attempt one more church," and it happened to be the SDA church. I I I was learning Portuguese, so I started with some Brazilian pastors, particularly one guy called Rodrigo Silva, who's well, the guy is super prepared, super well educated. He has two doctorates, and well, the way he spoke, and all the scientific evidence he used. He's an archaeologist. He used several evidences, several arguments that definitely convinced me there was a God, and this God was three different people in just one God: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And from there on, I've been following the SDA Church, of course, in Portuguese and Spanish and English. And well, it's been actually a little bit more than 2 years. I got baptized on June 5th, 2021, and until today, I'm quite happy with my church. I There's issues here, a lot of issues with my brethren, but that's something that is quite expected. So that's a little bit of my background, and the reason why I'm convinced this is the church that got the remnant church, I must say.
Awesome. Yes. Yes. Thank you for that. I definitely appreciate that. Quite the journey, my friend. Quite the journey. It's awesome that even though we stray, the Lord brings us back. So, um, I usually, when I want to talk with an SDA, and I don't know if you happen to browse my channel at all or look through my community post or my any of my live streams I've had, but I'm an ex SDA. So I'm a former SDA. I was born and raised in the SDA church. And I can, answer questions about that if you want, but um, probably my biggest concern and my biggest issue with Adventism is their gospel. And what is linked and a part of it in a way is the book of Daniel. Book of Daniel, especially Daniel's 2300 evenings and mornings. So that's why I focus on that as much as I do, which I mean, I do a video maybe once every 2 weeks. So I'm not super active because I have a busy life of my own. But so I'm hoping we can um, talk about that and flesh some things out. I might have you kind of, if you have a screen you want me to share of yours, I'm willing to do that. If you have a Bible app or a program you want to use, if not, we can just use the one I have up on the screen. And if you want to walk through, kind of give a little breakdown of why you believe the 2300 as the Adventists do, and then we kind of, I'll interact with that from there if you want to do it that way.
All right, perfect. I was hoping first to pay attention to your point of view as we were discussing with on the on the Walter Fight show. I was hoping to understand your point of view the with this topic.
Yeah.
I'm all ears, definitely. Uh, but as I mentioned on that conversation, I am definitely convinced this is the right interpretation. But I am definitely willing to listen what you have to say. That as you were kindly offering this opportunity, I'm definitely all about it.
Awesome. Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah, well, actually, now that I think about it, when I was on or when I was listening to his live stream or his premiere, I was in the middle of working, and so I'd type out a little bit real quick. I'd come back and look see if anybody responded, and start working some more. So I wasn't able to interact that much in the comment sections. And unfortunately, I mean, in the past, I have done pretty in-depth comment section back and forths, but the issue I have found with them is that, and that's not to say that you would do this, but just as much I possibly could. But we tend to talk past one another, and we don't really get to the meat of the issue, or we're not really interacting with the point that's being made, or even sometimes in my case, I can't make my point pretty well in the comment section. So I always found that talking in person or from voice to voice is always more beneficial. Um, so basically, a general uh, outline of my view is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but I hold to what's called the Antiochus view. If you have, that helps a lot. If not, I can explain it.
Please go ahead. I'm not familiar with that.
So, what that holds is that chapter 8 of Daniel, its main focus and concern is the activity of the little horn. And the little horn is a little horn that rises on the third beast. The third beast being the Greek Empire, or or the leopard from the previous vision in chapter 7. The little horn rises and is a part of the third beast, so it's a king in that third beast system. So in other words, it's a Greek king that rises, which would be Antiochus. And what he does is he persecutes and punishes the Jews for their transgressions and their iniquities, trampling on them, trampling on the sanctuary or in the host. And then this happens for 2300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary is restored. And this happened with Antiochus. There are two main positions with the timing. Some people who hold this view say that 2300 evening and mornings are days. Others say it is split in half and it is 1150 days. I do hold to the latter position, which is I do believe is cut in half. And we can get into the times more and all that. But and so the issue that I have, not only from holding my position, but the SDA position, is that it what I would say, it misuses and misapplies the text in order to prove 1844 as a prophetic time, which in reality, if we look at the history, 1844 was a false prophecy that never came true. And actually, I wanted to say this earlier, and I did forget. My apologies. I want to talk about this with you because hopefully you can eventually see that the 2300 evenings and mornings of the SDA Church is wrong. But I don't want you to lose your faith because it is wrong. Rather, I hope that your faith gets stronger over time, and you can see that just because the SDA Church is wrong on some things doesn't mean you have to lose faith completely in God. So I do want to preface this conversation with that. So if you have any questions from right now, you're more than welcome to ask them.
I, I, s- I don't know. I still don't get where we're getting with that, with this prophecy being fulfilled by Antioch.
Okay, yeah, I can explain that more in more detail. So we'll start from the beginning. And how well do you know the SDA Church's position?
Well, I understand the basic. I
Okay.
unfortunately I have become somewhat lazy the last few months, and I have stopped studying a little bit, but I am quite familiarized with the basics, which is all right. The angel is talking about when how long is it going to last the how long is it going to take for the sanctuary to be purified and so forth, etc. And they explain it's going to take 2300 years, and based on the edict from Artaxerxes. So that's what pretty much what I understand.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that gives me a general idea to work with. Yeah, yeah. Um, don't even worry about the laziness. It happens to me all the time. I mean, I get in my funks where I'll just dip down and I don't want to read or study or do anything. So I can definitely understand that. So I'll walk through the book of Daniel, chapter 8, and I'll explain my position in more detail. And if you have questions along the way, just stop me. Or if it sounds like I'm misusing or misinterpreting the text, go ahead and stop me and explain it to me. So it'll be a free flowing conversation. You're more than welcome to interrupt it as you see fit. So here we go. Vision is given to Daniel here. We see in verse 1 and 2. It's given the location of where he has the vision. We see in verse 3 that there is a ram. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that from verses 1 to 14, and then it is a vision. Now, the vision does not stop but from verses 15 to uh, the end of the chapter, it's explaining what these symbols are. Because if you look at the other, like if you look at chapter 2, right, Nebuchadnezzar has his dream, and then the interpretation is given. Chapter 7, the symbols are given in vision. The monstrosity, that crazy looking beast, the leopard, the bear, and then after that, the interpretation of those symbols are given. Same thing here in chapter 8. The symbols, the vision is given, and then the interpretation of those symbols are given. So when we want to look to see what these symbols mean, we'll be looking at the interpretation of that. So with that in mind, the ram, we see that there's a ram. We're not told what the ram is, but if we go down to verse Verse 20, it says right here, as for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media Persia. So the ram represents the Media Persian kingdom. And then right here, the goat represents the Greek kingdom. So let's make sure to keep that in mind as we read on. So this ram is standing on the bank, has two horns. Both were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last, probably referring to a king. I believe this king from the Persian side or the Media side. One of the kings was greater than the other one, and they ended up being the dominant king. I think it's the Persian kingdom. From there, we see this ram charging westward and northward and southward. That is referring to conquest of the nations that it does. No beast could stand before it. So the beast right here, no beasts, refers to other Gentile kingdoms. That's what this ram and this goat refer to are Gentile kingdoms. And there was no one who could rescue from his power. So when he conquered, and nobody could stop him. He did as he pleased and became great. As I was considering, said Daniel, behold, a male goat. And we saw that this goat is interpreted to be the Greek kingdom, or the third kingdom is another way to refer to it, if we believe that these visions are based off a four beast kingdom system. So like in chapter 7, you have the four beasts, the four kingdoms. I hold to that, and the SDA Church does as well too. All right. As I was considering, oh no, I read that. Excuse me. Oh, right. Lost my spot for a second. A male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. So it's referring to basically what the leopard has, right? Leopard's really fast, and the leopard has four wings. So in other words, his conquest coming from the west is very fast, and he conquers a vast amount of the kingdoms. And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. Now, we need to figure out what that conspicuous horn is. And in verse 22, it says, the goat is the king of Greece, or in verse 21, excuse me, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. Okay, so the first king we know is King Alexander the Great. So that is interpreted for us as well. We don't need to speculate as to what it is or what it refers to. All right. Verse 6. So this conspicuous, or no, he came to the ram, that is the goat, with the first horn, to the ram with two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. So in other words, he's conquering the second beast kingdom, which is the Medo-Persia kingdom. Then the goat became exceedingly great. But when he was strong, the great horn was broken. So notice this. He became exceedingly great during the reign of the first king, which is Alexander the Great. And instead of it, there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. So these four conspicuous horns, they rise up in the four winds of heaven. Now we need to find out what these four horns are and let's see if it is interpreted for us. Let's see. All right. Verse 23. Verse 23 tells us what those horns refer to. It says, and at the latter end of, verse 22. Excuse me. As for the horn that was broken, it's referring to Alexander the Great, in place of which, so we know when these four horns rise, and it is right after Alexander the Great dies or the great horn is broken. It says, in place of which four others arose. That is four kingdoms shall arise from his nation. His nation referring to the first horn, that is Alexander the Great, but not with his power. So we know that each kingdom, the Ptolemaic, Seleucid, and the other two, I can't um, recall off the top of my head. These rise, but they're not. None of them are as strong as the first horn. But all four of them together could be considered as strong as the single horn. But they all end up fighting amongst one another. So, all right. So we understand that these four horns are the four kingdoms, or the breaking up of the Greek kingdom into four parts. Verse 9. Now, here's where the little horn rises. So out of one of them, out of one of what? Now, out of one of the four horns, a little horn arises. Oops, messing with my computer. All right, computer's spazzing out. All right. So out of one of these four horns, which is the four kingdoms that make up Greece, a little horn arises. He grows exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. Now that's referring to the little horn's expansion of its kingdom. Now, does the interpretation talk about the little horn at all? Let's check that out. It's verse 20, 23. And at the latter end, so in other words, towards the end of their kingdom refers to the four kingdoms right here mentioned, which we found as the four horns. When the transgressors, now remember that for later, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. So this little horn, we figure out, arises toward the end of the four kingdoms, and also what has to happen is the transgressors have reached their limit. So those two things have to happen. It has to be at the latter end of the four kingdoms, and the transgressors have to reach their limit. That is the limit of transgressions. And what arises in response to these transgressors is a king of bold face. One who understands riddles shall arise. So, in other words, this little horn is a king of bold face who understands riddles, and he arises because of the transgressors reaching their limit. In other words, they've transgressed for so long and have not repented and turned from their transgressions that divine judgment and punishment has come upon them. And we understand that this happened, if we want to say it is referring to the Jews, which I believe the transgressors are the Jews, during the time of Antiochus's reign. And so both of those match up. Antiochus comes around about the latter end of the four kingdoms, and also he responds, and he punishes the transgressors, which are the Jews. And we understand from the book of Maccabees, which is not an inspired book, but it gives us a lot of historical details, that the Jews were, there was actually a number of Jews who were siding with Antiochus and the Greek pagan culture, and was bringing Greek paganism into Jerusalem and Israel. And also there were those who were following Antiochus himself and supporting him. And what Antiochus was doing, and we'll get into this more, but he was taking away Sabbath. He was murdering the Jews who kept, not only kept Sabbath, but would circumcise their children, which we understand from the Old Testament law that in order to be part of the covenant and keep law and everything, you had to be circumcised on the eighth day. He was not allowing that to happen. He wasn't allowing any of the other holy days to be kept, and basically
I'm
anything that.
sorry, but
Go ahead.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, but the communication broke for a while, and I missed some of the explanation, like
Oh yeah.
30 seconds, something like that.
What did you last hear?
Well, the last thing I heard was about when you were talking about the Maccabees book.
Okay. Not too far back then. So I'll actually we can get back to that in a little bit. I'll just supporting the point that this king of boldface will be Antiochus, because we'll see later on down here in the text that he's the one who does all the things that the little horn does, but also he arises at the correct time, which the transgressors who have reached their limit, which are the Jews, and it's at the latter end of the four Greek kingdoms. There is no other king that I'm aware of that arises around this time. But we'll get back up here. I kind of got sidetracked. So we saw that there is an interpretation that the little horn is a king of boldface who understands riddles. And that's important because it's not a kingdom necessarily, it's more of a king that represents a kingdom. But it's still a part of the goat. We have not seen a transition from the goat into the fourth beast like we did from the ram to the goat. So in other words, if there was a point to where we would start talking about the fourth kingdom, in other words, Rome, we'd see it go from a goat to the unidentifiable monstrosity of chapter 7, sometimes depicted as a dinosaur or some crazy beast. But we don't see that, so it's still in the third beast, and we know it's at the latter end of that beast kingdom. So from here on out, in verse 9 onwards, verse 9 onwards is talking about the little horn and the activity of the little horn. And this is right here what the 2300 is about. And I'll prove that when we get to the verses. But basically, the 2300 evenings and mornings, its only focus is the time of the activity of the little horn and the persecution that it does. So the activity is the persecution that is. So when I say the activity of the little horn, I'm referring to what it does to the transgressors. That is the focus of the 2300. So, all right, we'll move on. Verse 9, out of one of them, okay, a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, that is towards Egypt, towards the east, and toward the glorious land, which would be Israel. It grew great even to the host of heaven. Now, little horn here, it grew great even to the host of heaven. And some of the hosts and some of the stars, it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. Now, there's been speculation. Well, does the host refer to one thing, whether angels or the Israelites, and then the stars refers to the other. And one of the reasons why people do that is because in the book of Daniel, especially, but the Bible in general, it does show this spiritual warfare that is happening behind the scenes, and at the same time that these beast kingdoms are fighting and conquering and being conquered. But when we look at the interpretation of the stars and the host, we see that it is just referring to the Israel. These won't be the transgressors; these will be the faithful Israelites. Okay, and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. So the prince of the host would be Christ. He is the prince of Israel. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him. So notice this little horn takes away the burnt offering from the prince of the host, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. So that is the activity of what the little horn does. It tramples the host and the stars. It takes away the regular burnt offering or the daily, the tamid, and it overthrows the sanctuary. Verse 12, and a host will be given over to it. Notice this here. Remember, I mentioned keeping focus of the transgressors, because really all of this is happening because of the transgressors. It says a host will be given over to it. The it refers to the little horn, together with the regular burnt offering or the daily, because now the because tells us why, because of transgression. So we know that the little horn is active and responding to and because of the transgressors and the transgressions that they commit. And it will throw truth to the ground and it will act and prosper. Okay, verse 13 and 14 here are important as well. Daniel says, I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long? Notice this here. For how long? So, what's the duration of the vision concerning? Now, the vision is concerning specifically the regular burnt offering or the tamid, regular burnt offering, which is what the little horn takes away. The transgression that makes desolate, so the transgression and the transgressors, and the giving over of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. So, in other words, the question is, how long will the little horn be active and persecute and overthrow and do all of his activities? The answer is in verse 14. And he said to me, so the Holy One said to him, for, this is the answer for the question for how long, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. So, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, the sanctuary will be trampled upon. The host will be trampled upon. The daily will be taken away. And then, once that's been done and completed, the sanctuary shall be restored and put back to its rightful state. So far, does everything, am I pretty clear in my explanation? Any questions for me?
No, I'm quite clear. I'm understanding that. Um, Although I'm still not convinced for the reason that, well, 2,300 days, literal days, are 6 years and something. So I don't understand where it started and where it finished. It is not um, as clear to me from the text that that is the what it is intended to be interpreted. I don't know if it makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So here's a question then I would have for you. If you don't see a starting point for the 2,300 given in Daniel chapter 8, where would you go to start the 2,300 evenings and mornings? And now, to real quick, I do believe a starting point is given here, and I can explain that more in a second.
Sorry, you cut from there.
Okay, my apologies. I so we'll just start with this. If it's unclear from chapter 8 where to start the 2,300, where would you go to make it more clear and give a starting point?
Well, I know where it starts from the SDA explanation, and I'm pretty sure you know about it. So I was wondering if you can explain to me where you're starting those 2,300 days.
Sure. Yeah. Um, so as I pointed out in verse 13, uh, the 2,300 concerns specifically the activity of the little horn. And we know the little horn, whoever we say it is, if we say it is Rome, then the 2,300 refers to, and that is a slight possibility. I would say it's not as likely as the, it, the activity of the little horn referring to a king in the third beast kingdom, but let's say it is in the fourth beast kingdom. When do we know from history when the physical sanctuary was trodden underfoot during the reign of Rome? I'm only aware of one time when that happens under the fourth beast. Do you know when?
Yeah, in the 70 AD.
Correct. So if we are going to say that this is actually referring to the activity of a little horn in the fourth beast, then this would be starting in the Jewish Roman War.
But that is the part where I am not understanding, because if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that this 2300 days was referring to Antioch, not,
Yes.
and that is a Greek commander, not a Roman commander.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And Antioch is like, if I'm not mistaken, 200 or 300 years before the 70 AD.
Yeah. Roughly 200, about 200 years. Yeah. No, I was making a point that if we were going to put it under the fourth beast, then that's when it would be started. But I believe it is during the third beast. And Antiochus, we know, um, I can share some documents that go into more details about his activities and his life and his flourishings in his progression of his kingdom. But we do know that for a fact, Antiochus overthrew the sanctuary. He took away the regular burnt offering. He trampled the hosts and the stars and trampled them over and persecuted them. And the times, I don't have the times off the top of my head, but some people go with the 2300 evenings and mornings as actual days. So it's, almost 7 years under that. And so that would, the time around when that would be started is 170, 171 BC. But you cut that in half. And the reason why I hold to that position is I believe this vision is mostly concerned is concerned with all of those things. But notice the first thing it mentions here. It says, "For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering?" And we know from First Maccabees, and again, I can get these resources later. I don't have them on hand, but we know from First Maccabees that it was roughly 3.5 years before the sanctuary was cleansed by the Maccabeans in 163 or 64 BC, that uh, Antiochus came to Israel and ransacked the temple, took away the daily, and took away other things from there for his war efforts with Egypt. And so that's when I believe this time frame started, because he also persecuted the Jews at the time. And then later on, more so because he ended up getting pushed back from Egypt because Rome came. And then when he got pushed back, he took his aggression out on Israel and persecuted them more. And then we also know that he passed laws saying you can't observe Sabbath or any other holy days. He slaughtered insane amount of Jews for circumcision, for keeping holy days, Sabbath, keeping food laws, and all these kind of things. And so all that fits in here perfectly.
No, and I don't doubt about it, because actually that is being taught in the SDA church. But I go back to my original question: how do we have certainty that all of this occurred during 2023 literal days? Because, well, you, as a former SDA, you know, our interpretation, and for me that interpretation is way more structured, and not to diminish what you're saying. I really appreciate and I understand your point, and it totally makes a lot of sense. But to me, the the SDA church is way more structured. The periods of time are more defined, and that's the reason. That's what I told you on the Walter fight show, that I am way more convinced with the interpretation that the SDA Church gives, because, well, it starts with the Artaxerxes, what is the word? Um,
Decree.
yeah, Thank you. And
Go
to
ahead.
me that way makes a lot of sense because of the explanation they make the
Go
400.
ahead real quick and establish that for us then, and let's see if that makes more sense than my explanation of the 2300. Uh, and then I can interact with that a little bit if you want.
Sure. I mean, all right. The let me go to the.
And if you need a if you need to share a
No thanks. I trust me. I got a lot.
if you need to share a screen, go ahead and do that, and I'll take mine off if you want. If not, you can tell me what verses to go to, and I'll
No
go.
worries. No worries. Let me.
So while you're looking, I'll just blab on for a little bit.
All right. Thank you.
Um, let's see here. So verse 24, and this is still the interpretation of what we saw in verses roughly 3 to 14. His power shall be great, but not by his own power. That's the little horn. He shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. And remember, this is happening during the third beast kingdom, that is the goat, or Rome, or I mean not Rome, Greece. That's important to keep in mind. This because this whole vision is about the activity that happens within that third beast, not the fourth beast. Unless I am proven wrong, I don't see any transition from the third beast kingdom to the fourth beast kingdom. I think the assumption is made by the SDA position that because there's a little horn in chapter 7, it has to be the same one. But I don't see any reason or indication for that in the text
All
of
right.
chapter. Okay.
I found it. Thank you. All right. If we go to Daniel 9:24 with the 70 weeks prophecy, and this is the SDA explanation. It says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So the explanation they give is that this word determined is the the word, the Hebrew word shatak or katak, whatever is actually pronounced, and this word means basically cut off, to cut off. So the official explanation is you make this word a question, cut off from what, and then you the only timing prophecy previously given in Daniel is that one of the 2300 days and nights. So that's why for me it gives sense, it makes sense that from this these 70 weeks are going to be cut off from the 2300 days, and these 70 weeks would start with the with Artaxerxes decree. So that's why I'm, to me at least, it makes a lot of sense. It's more um, structured, and that's why I'm definitely uh, in love with this explanation. It makes sense to me.
Okay. So the word kathak is what's called, to use a big term, is what's called a hapax legomenon. Which in other words, it means it's a single use word in the whole Bible. There's no other place in the Bible where this word is used. There is non-biblical literature like the Talmud and stuff that uses this word, but within the Bible, this is the only place that that word is used, and that's important because sometimes we can help figure out what a word means by how it's used in other places, and if there's a similar place, like say in Daniel chapter 2, if it's used there, then we have a better understanding what it means. But since it's not, the word has to be ultimately determined, and not only just single use words, but words in general ultimately have to be determined by their context, because even though words have what's called a semantic range or a domain, um, which means they have various definitions, they don't actually have any meaning until they're put into their context. So the context here, I mean, I can go through that as well too, but I don't see anywhere in the context here where it's telling us to cut this 70 weeks off of the 2300, because remember, the 2300 has to do with the activity of the little horn and is trampling down of the sanctuary, whereas the 70 weeks, what is it focused on? 70 weeks is focused on the restoration of the sanctuary and his people. So within these 70 weeks, when the decree goes out, we see right here that Jerusalem is being restored,
Well,
it's being
actually,
built
with
up. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
You're good.
with all due respect, my understanding is that 70 weeks, it's actually referring to the period of time that the Jews have to restore uh, um, justice and all of this. And but it points to the beginning of Jesus's ministry. That's what I understand, and it revolves through that, and all of that happens during the Roman Empire, and that is actually another question I have, because as a matter of fact, I was paying attention to some of your videos, and I didn't quite understand how you are interpreting the that last week.
Yeah. So that's going to be it'll get us a little away from Daniel chapter 8, but if you're okay with that,
Yeah.
I can explain it. So, how I take the last week is all right. So, verse 26, it says, and after the 62 weeks, that is, after the 7 and 62 weeks, because we know the 7 happened first, or even though it's all, in order, you go 7 and 62, so that's 69 weeks. So after 69 weeks, the anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. So I believe that refers to the death of Messiah on the cross. Now, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Now, I do believe verse 27 also recapitulates. If you're not sure what that means, it means it repeats what verse 26 is saying. And so that first phrase, anointed one shall be cut off. What also happens is, and he, that is the anointed one, shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. So, in other words, the new covenant is being made because of the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Christ. Now, it also says, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offerings. So, in other words, the first half, we know he puts off, or he puts an end to sacrifice and offering. How? Theologically and effectively into our who we are. refers to the cross, but historically, we know that happens in 70 AD. Now, what's important to know about 70 AD is, if you've not read Josephus's book, War of the Jewish Wars, and especially in book 4, I believe it is, where he gives an account of what happened in these Jewish wars. Give me one second. Excuse me. What we know, what he tells us that happens is that the Jews, and this is going to be what I'm going to be pointing out here in a second, the Jews are the ones who actually destroy the sanctuary in the city before Rome even comes in to destroy it. And actually, when Rome comes in, Rome initially wants to make a peace treaty with Israel, and they want to say, okay, we'll forgive what's happened, no more, just stop, and let's go about and you rebuild what you've destroyed, and we'll go back home. Well, the Jews that took over Jerusalem and also took over the sanctuary and utterly destroyed it, not only did they allow homosexuality and all this kind of stuff to happen within the sanctuary, not just Jerusalem in general, but the sanctuary specifically, they slaughtered the priestly caste in the sanctuary. They tore down the structures in the most holy place and fortified it. Did all kinds of wicked behavior. They were going around pillaging. They would set camps up, or little like ambush sites, and they would ambush other Jews and steal from them and murder them and rape, and all this kind of just wicked behavior. And towards the end of the Jewish wars, they were stuck in there and they're cannibalizing and just horrible things. But all that is to make the point that the people of the prince, so if the prince is Christ, he's the anointed one, which I believe you agree with that. The people, in other words, his people, are the Jews. And history shows that these people are the ones who destroyed the city and the sanctuary before the Romans even came and finished it off. So when it,
Okay, hold
yeah,
on.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Uh, and you're saying, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city of the sanctuary. You're meaning Jesus' disciples. Is that what I understood?
No, the people would be the Jews in general, the Jewish people, and not every single Jew, but
But how will they destroy the sanctuary?
uh, I just explained. But it's basically you what he says
Through
here.
the pillages and all right, okay, okay. But
on, on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate. So this desolation that happens by a group, couple group of Jews. One, they're called the Zealots.
okay,
One group is ran by a guy named John Giscala. That's his more anglicized name. Excuse me. You can look up John of Giscala. He ran one of the groups of zealots, and they basically destroyed the sanctuary and tore down all the furniture, slaughtered the high priest and the priest in the sanctuary, and took various pieces of wood that they destroyed in
the, the
metals. And
problem the
go ahead.
problem I have with this is that this is basically the or it's actually the abomination of desolation prophecy that Jesus mentioned, if I'm not mistaken.
Agreed.
And if you go to Luke 21, he is explaining that that is when when the armies, the Roman armies, are surrounding Jerusalem. So if you read Luke chapter and you read then Daniel 26, that people of the prince who is to come is actually the Roman army.
Right. Yeah, that's spoken of here in the last section. So uh, its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. That's referring to when Rome comes and finishes everything off. But the initial destroying of the city and the sanctuary and the abominations that happen in there, that caused it to be desolate was definitely happened by the Jews. That's just a
But the problem
historical
is
fact.
that if you're surrounded if you're surrounded by an army, it doesn't make sense that you start destroying your own city, that which is
Hey,
actually keeping
I'm getting
you.
a phone. I'm getting a phone call. Give me 1 second.
Sure, sure, no, no worries.
Alrighty, I'm back. Thank you for waiting. Appreciate it. So, yeah. So your point, but so right here, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator, that's referring to the Roman Empire. Now, what the Jews started doing was before Rome came, all the activity, and basically why Rome came was because of the civil war happening in Israel with the Jews. You have the priestly caste and those who followed the high priests and the priests. Then you have the zealots run by John of Giscala, and then also Eleazar, which is another zealot faction, and they fought amongst each other, and then also fought against the priests and the people that followed them. And most of the people were actually not fighting; they were scared and being slaughtered and taking their homes and killed and all that. And so I guess a question I would have for you is if that interpretation is wrong, who is this prince here in verse 26 and who are the people of this prince?
Well, my understanding is that one, the people of the prince is who is to come is it is actually the Roman army, because it doesn't make sense to say uh, the prince is Jesus and therefore his people are the Jews. At least, I mean, I'm trying to be very very respectful with that, but to me it does not make sense that, well, after all, Jesus is basically detaching himself from the Jews, because the Jews rejected Jesus. So it doesn't make sense to me that calling the people of the prince they are the Jews. No, my understanding is he is talking, Daniel, he is talking here about the Roman armies, and the from the and the people is the Roman commander.
Okay, so you'd say the prince in verse 26 is a different prince than the one in verse 25. Is that correct?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, let me see the KJV version real quick. So I know I don't like the ESV version as much in this verse because it kind of splits up the 7 and 62 weeks at separate times. So yeah, so the KJV says the Messiah, the Prince.
And actually, if you notice, Messiah the Prince, this Prince is in caps lock,
Yep.
and the other Prince is in lowercase.
Yeah, that's a KJV interpreter's interpretation of that, which I'm not disagreeing with at all. I'm just saying that's what the translators how they it's their addition to it, I guess you could say. That's how they interpret
Uh,
it. Well, you got to remember that this whole prophecy is about your people, which is the Jewish people. If you read the book of Daniel, your people is used a number of times, and it refers to the Jews and your holy city. Again, just read through the prayer. We can walk through the prayer of Daniel. Your holy city refers to Jerusalem, and so we know that whatever's going to be happening is going to be happening to and because of the Jews. And now notice here, remember in chapter 8, when I pointed out the transgressors and the transgression. Notice one of the 6 things that are to be accomplished by the 70 weeks is to finish the transgression. And so we got to ask, what does that mean? What is this transgression that is happening? And who are these transgressors? Again, I would argue it is the Jewish people, and history does play out that the Jews are the ones that caused Rome to come and ultimately destroy and enslave them and put all the curses on them. Because if they would not have done that stuff, Rome would not have come. And actually, like I said, when Rome first came, Rome actually wanted to have peace with them and didn't want to fight them, and said, "Look, you guys stop this nonsense, go back to being normal, and we'll go home." Instead, what did the zealots do? Basically said, "Screw you," and kept doing their thing. I'm gonna look through. You go ahead and talk for a minute. You go ahead. I'm gonna look through something real quick.
Sure, no worries.
Okay, so I have the SDA Bible commentary. And so I'm looking here to see how they interpret. Um, it doesn't mean every single SDA will interpret it this way, but it gives you a general idea. So here in verse 26, it's the commentary is commenting on the phrase "and the people." So in other words, this part right here, "and the people," and they comment on this and they say, and I quote right here, "the marginal reading, 'and they, the Jews, shall be no more his people,' found in some Bibles is unsupported by the Hebrew." So it looks like you are um, being consistent with the SDA position from what I see from that. They don't talk about yeah, okay. They don't talk about the prince in verse 25. They say go to chapter 11, verse 22, which they say it's Christ as well there. I know that.
Which Bible do you have? I have somewhat brand new, I believe, the Andrew's Bible with commentaries, and this one does have the mention of the well, of course, it's in Spanish, so let me translate. It says when it refers to the people of a prince who is to come, uh, it says it happens after the death of Christ. It is Roman under okay. It explains the word princeps. It's a Latin word, princeps, which is
Hmm.
an imperial. Uh, how do you say that? Title.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, no, I believe this happens. So even if I am wrong on this, which I obviously don't think I am, but if even if I am wrong, this is still what's happening within the Roman Jewish war. That's what this is talking about. The first line, anointed one shall be cut off, have nothing, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. For half the week, he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. That I believe refers to what Christ accomplished on the cross.
I
Uh,
agree. Yeah.
but there is something to say that the sacrifices did go on physically in the
Yeah.
sanctuary until 70 AD.
Yeah. That's for sure. But of course we well, at least we in the SDA we believe it is because Jesus complied with the prophecy, and he made the atonement for everyone, and that's what it refers in this Daniel 9:27.
Right. Yeah. The main reason probably the main reason why I hold to the position I do is history.
Mm.
History shows that the Jews did this right here, and it also goes well with chapter 11. Chapter 11 complements my position as well. Um, but the Jews definitely did destroy the city and the sanctuary before the Romans did, way before the Romans did.
Do you
Um,
have any sources to look upon?
yeah, so if you read Josephus, the Jewish Wars,
Okay,
if
just
you look up John of Giscala,
just a second to write it down.
yeah.
All right. What is it? Sorry.
So it's Josephus, Jewish Wars. I believe it's book four. I could be mistaken on which book, but I think it's book four. And it's you look up John of Giscala. Giscala is spelled Gischala. That is John of Giscala. And if you just read the whole account of him and Eleazar and the Zealots and their activities, you'll see that, I mean, just flat out, they destroyed the city and the sanctuary, and they caused abominations to make desolate in the sanctuary. Most definitely did. Not only did they
But
allow.
that's the problem, and well, again, with all due respect, but if you read it within the Bible context, it does make sense that these these folks who destroyed were actually the Romans and not the Jews. And in other words, you are going to external sources to justify your position, which I respect. But uh, if you go to sola scriptura, well, the same Bible is actually explaining that the people who destroyed the sanctuary and all of that is definitely the Romans and not the Jews.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, first off, what I would kind of mention in passing is that, to an example, to go to outside sources, for you to establish 457 BC, you go to an outside source. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I do see what you are saying. Um, but Rome does, it mentions Rome in there as well too. But notice here in Matthew 24:15, it says, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And let those who are in Judea flee to the mountain. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. Let the one who is in the field not turn back his cloak. And alas, for women who are pregnant, those who are nursing infants in those days, pray that your flight's not on winter or the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation." So, in other words, this is not saying it's, at least here, it's not saying, maybe in Mark it mentions the armies, but here it's just saying, look out for the abomination of desolation that is in the holy place. And what is that exactly? It's not Rome coming in and just destroying the sanctuary. It is the Jews that went into the most holy place and slaughtered the priests there, destroyed the furniture, caused homosexuality in there, rampant homosexuality, slaughtering of women and children, and pillaging in there, keeping the gold, and having warfare and barricading it and making it a fortress, because they hid out in there when they were being attacked by the other
All right, but
common
if you
groups.
go to Luke 21 and 20, it says, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh."
Yes,
So
yeah, for sure. What verse was it again? Sorry, Luke 21.
20.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come. Exactly. Yeah, no, my that's actually supports my position if you think about it, because this is saying that the army, which is Rome, know that Jerusalem's desolation has come.
Yeah,
Yes,
it refers to the Roman army. It does
yes.
not make it. It does not says the desolation is the pillages and all of that stuff that you were doing. I mean, I don't deny it. It may happen, but the reference to the desolation is actually Rome surrounding Jerusalem.
Right. Yeah, yeah. That's how I interpret this last part here in verse 26 when it says its end, that is this city and sanctuary, its end shall come with a flood, referring to the armies. It to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed. Yet that is Rome right there. Fact.
Yeah, but also supports the what it says on the prince, the people of the prince.
It can, yeah, it can. I don't say that it cannot. It definitely could, yeah.
Uh,
Either way, this activity happened in 70 AD. Whether I'm right or you're right, it's definitely happened in 70 AD.
yeah, yeah, that's for
Cool.
sure.
But yeah, you asked if I could explain my position more, so that that, I mean, if you have any more questions on that, I can try to go in more depth.
But no, I'm pretty cool actually. I understand your position. I still do not agree with it. I am very satisfied with the explanation the SDA Church gives. Um, Actually, I appreciate the time you have spent on this because, as a matter of fact, I feel more enthusiastic in studying way more. Definitely, I need to study way more than I've been doing. So I
Awesome. Yeah.
definitely appreciate the time, and I believe it has worked a lot. Maybe not as you would have expected, but definitely it is pushing me to study harder.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't know what the future hold, what the Lord has for our futures. So, um, He's faithful and He's true.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so, if we want to get back to, um, if you could kind of explain to us how you believe uh, starting the 2300 in 457 BC makes more sense in Daniel 8 than the 2300 referring to the activity of the little horn, if you don't mind doing that.
Sure. No, well, in the version you are using, it doesn't says it doesn't use the same word, but in the King James version,
I can switch for you.
sure. Thanks.
There we go.
We are- all right. And okay, on Daniel 9:24, it says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people. Again, if you go to that word, well, you kindly explained it is it was used just one time there. uh, but anyway, the explanation is that these 70 weeks are cut off from something, and the only time prophecy given by Daniel, the last one he gave was the 2300 days night. So that's where the SDA Church takes, um, or give the beginning of those 2300 uh, years to starting from the decree from Artaxerxes. Using this same explanation, this 70 weeks explanation, the it will begin with Artaxerxes decree. It it happened in 457 BC, and since these were determined, is used the Hebrew word is shotak. It means cut off. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm not explaining it right, but to me, as I said before, it makes a little bit more sense. Uh,
Okay, so go ahead and go to chapter 8 and try to make that connection if you could, because I understand this word could be translated as cut off, but if you read here, remember the prayer of Daniel. What's the prayer of Daniel is, um, Lord, I know that these 70 years are coming to an end. Please forgive me and my people their sins. We disregarded you. We disregarded your covenant. We despised you. Please uh, be compassionate and merciful upon us and restore us to restore your land, restore your people, restore your nation in your name. That is the prayer that this is built upon. And then we have here, and Gabriel comes and in response to that prayer, he's told this, that 70 weeks or 77s are determined or cut off. The cutoff can be cut off from time, which is what I would say. Or in other words, they're cut out of time. There is, which is why determined is a proper translation. And most translators recognize this. 77s are determined upon your people and your holy city. And then the six things are given.
yeah, in the original Hebrew is 70 weeks are cut off.
Now, real quick, the starting point of the 77s is what? Is the going forth of a command to restore and build Jerusalem.
Yeah,
Now, 2300, what's the starting point for that? The 2300 starting point is the activity of the little horn. Because remember, the question in verse 13 is asked, how long? And in verse 14, the answer is given, 2300 evenings and mornings. And so it seems like we're saying, if we hold to your position, that two opposites are happening at the same time. The sanctuary is being restored, 77s, and also the little horn is trampling the sanctuary down to 2300. And you're saying those are starting at the exact same time. So am I explaining my argument or my critique well?
yeah, I understand you're referring to the. I mean, I already understand what you meant when you said on the chat regarding the context of the reading. Sorry.
That's right. So
That was the hood. Sorry about that.
now you're good. No worries. No worries.
Uh, anyway, the thing is that I already know what you meant by that. I still don't share it. I still don't agree with it. I I'm going to stick to the Adventist Church because of the reasons I gave at the beginning. I believe the Lord Himself brought me to this church, and well, I'm going to stick with their theology. So I really appreciated your time. It has been very, very, very enlightening. But I mean, to me, it makes more sense what I tried to explain because unfortunately my English is still not that good.
Oh, that's pretty
but
good, man. You're good.
but I really really appreciate your time and the effort. But I'm sticking to the Adventist theology.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So keep in mind when you study more detail the things that I am pointing out to you.
Sure. No,
So
I'm definitely saving this link to this video because I will study way more. I am definitely going to find some answers. I'm going to use it to talk to some of the elders and the pastors to to improve my knowledge. Definitely, that's why I'm really thankful for joining and giving me this chance. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah, no problem, man. So I'll summarize some of my arguments so that way if you play it and your elder or somebody in your church you wanted to listen to, these are the arguments that I'm making. One, the little horn is a part of the third beast kingdom. It's not part of the fourth beast kingdom.
All
We
right.
don't see a transition from the third to fourth beast kingdom in chapter 8. So therefore, the interpretation that is given at the end of the verses, like verse 20 through 2, 23, and all that, shows that it's still part of the third beast kingdom. Also, we see that the activity of the little horn is the time prophecy, and that is what this vision is concerning. So that's its main focus, is the activity of the little horn. That is another argument I have, is the activity is not for a 2300 years, that is an encompassing vision that encompasses many things. Rather, it is specifically the activity of the little horn. And we see that in the question in verse 13 and the answer to the question in verse 14. Um, I would also argue that the little horns rise up, or the little horns, the four horns rise up in the four winds. They're not separate, they are one and the same. So, in other words, it's a distinction without a difference. So, if you say that the little horn arises in one of the winds, you are saying it arises in one of the horns. We see this given in chapter 11, verse 4. It explains that even more. And also in the explanation of this vision here in like verses 21 or 20, somewhere around there. Um, and then also the point I made with the 77s in Daniel chapter 9, that's referring to when it starts the restoration of the temple. Here we see the 2300 is the destruction of the trampling of the temple. Another argument I would argue, and real quick, if you want to grab an elder and bring them on, all three of us can talk. I'm more than willing to do that. I just need to be let it know ahead of time when you want to do that.
Sure.
Uh, the Because what your elder is going to probably say is he's going to bring up the words mare and kazon. I don't know if you've ever heard of those words in the Hebrew or not.
Nope.
Okay. So he's going to argue that mare and kazon refers to two different parts of this vision. The kazon is the 2300, the mare is within the 2300. And I would argue that that is not the case in this text, but that they'll take a interaction or a lot of explaining for me to do. And I know it sounds like you want to leave here soon, so I would argue that the mare uh, is the explanation of the kazon. And again, I can go into more details with that. I'm sure if your elder or pastor hears that, he'll say I'm wrong, but there is explanation for that. I'd also argue that Daniel understands the vision, at least most of it. And like in chapter 1 says that Daniel was given understanding of the visions that were given to him. And we also see that, the explanation, Daniel understands this explanation. I mean, he's told that the goat is Greece, so he understands, okay, the goat is Greece. I'm sure he had a certain understanding. So, what that refers to more so, I think, is he probably talked to other Jews about this vision, and they did not have any understanding of it. There's probably some other arguments that I am forgetting, but if we do interact again and you bring an elder, I will, bring more arguments. So,
Sure.
with that being
Perfect.
said, I don't know if you want to, or you have to take off.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to open up the stream for anybody who wants to come. Jeremy, I do very much appreciate your time, and I thank you for being willing to come on and conversate. Like I said in the backstage, it is very hard for me to find an SDA who wants to come on and talk, let alone talk about this topic, because it is very close, near and dear to SDA's heart. So it took a lot of courage for you to do that, and I do appreciate that a lot.
No, thank you very much for having me in, And again, I really appreciate it. It has been enlightening and definitely challenging for me to start studying way more. Not a little, but actually way more than I've been studying in the past. It was a challenge. I give you that because yeah, it makes sense some of the things you've said, but I'm quite sure I will find the answers. And again, I'm very satisfied so far with the SDA's theology.
Hey, Jeremy. Sorry to bug you. I know you have to go. Looks like this. Chris Lucas here. He said, I like to pop on and explain a big issue with October 22nd, 1844 date in of itself, and I can do it quick. It is something the Advent Defense League ignores. I don't know if you want to stay and tag along and listen to that before you go. If not, I'm not
All right,
a
sure.
prisoner.
Just give me like 2 minutes. All right.
Yeah, sure. Okay, all right. I was texting and typing at the same time. So, Chris Lucas, man, if you want to come on, he said he's willing to listen to you real quick. If you want, he just has a couple things he has to do real quick. He'll listen to you, and he'll probably sounds like he has to take off here soon. Um, but yeah, go ahead, come on and give your points about October 22nd, because really the 2300 is that's what it leads up to. Chris Lucas, what's going on, brother?
Hey man, I was gonna say he can go. He can go, and like if he listens back to the show too, he can just listen back later to what I have to say. But this would be a really good question for him to ask his pastor. Is that whole issue with the Calman's ladder? Because like this is something I can't get out of an SDA, and maybe they could get it out of the SDA pastor if I can just find the ladder real quick. I'm like, I don't have everything really organized. So sorry. Oh, I think I found it just now. Maybe. Oh yeah, I think I found it right here. Is that letter? Because I'll have you just now let me present my screen. And I'll just go. I'm not going to read the whole letter. I'm just going to read part of it because this is a big issue. All right, so I'm trying to share the screen now.
There it is. Okay.
Okay.
All right, cool. There we go.
All right, so in this letter, this is a lot. This is what the SDA's based their whole 18. Man, I lost my cursor. Sorry. Okay, so this is what the SDA's based their whole 1844 October 22nd Day of Atonement on, right? And they say, oh, it's based on the Karaites. Well, when you read this letter, you can clearly see that this guy E.S. Kalman, he's not a Karaite. So this is a lie. And so we'll just go ahead and read it. I got it from Pickle Publishing, which is an SDA website. So that links right at the top to read this letter for yourself. So it's not something I made up. So it says, anyway, this is a letter from E.S. Kalman. It says, Mr. Editor, I have been requested by a friend to write a few lines for your paper on the subject of the Jewish mode of reckoning time. I am a descendant of the ancient Karaite Jews who have always rejected the authority of the rabbins and have ever considered the Old Testament as the only rule of the only rule of our faith. We believe that the scriptures teach us plainly that we should observe Passover. Anyway, I'm not, like I said, I don't want to read it because I don't want to be take too much time. Let me skip down to the last line of the paragraph. So this letter was written in 1844, and it says the rabbinical Jews commenced their seventh day of the month on September 12th, 1843, but we did not commence ours until October 13th of 1843. The 10th day of our seventh month will be October 22nd, which will be the true Day of Atonement for this year. So this is clearly where they're basing their Day of Atonement on, right? Now, let me get down to this line right here. It says the rabbinical Jews reckon their time from sunset to sunset, but we reckon ours from sunrise to sunrise. Consequently, our Day of Atonement will commence on Monday morning at sunrise, October 21st, and will end on Tuesday morning at sunrise on October 22nd. So you can see that they're using a sunrise to sunrise calendar. That would be a Samaritan calendar, not a Karaite calendar. So this guy looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about, because true Jews and true Karaites use evening to evening calendar and dating. And so I've asked several people, especially the Seventh Day the Adventist Defense League. I said, "Do you have any proof of any Karaite, any real Karaite, keeping this calendar?" Because I said this guy he's not a Karaite, because we know Karaites don't keep sunrise to sunrise time. So do you have any proof from a Karaite that you based your date on a Karaite or a Jewish calendar? And so far, I've heard nothing from any Seventh Day Adventist, and I've been asking this for almost a year. So maybe your pastor could also answer that question.
All right, I will. I will investigate that. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like a lot of SDAs have ever had that pointed out to them.
Okay. Okay.
So, and because
No,
none of them
I've
knew how
never
to
heard of
answer
that.
it.
I've never heard of that. So I will. I will definitely investigate. I'm quite interested now.
All right, yeah, that's all. I just want to throw that little thing out there.
Okay. Well, gents, thank you very much. I appreciate again, and I hope to talk to you soon.
All right, Jeremy, take care. Thanks again for
Yeah,
coming
Jeremy,
on.
thanks for
Appreciate it.
coming on our show. I appreciate it too.
Bye bye. Take care.
See
All
ya.
right, thank you.
Well, I mean, you and I have gone over Daniel pretty in depth. I mean, I don't see any STAs, which not many follow me, really, to be honest with you. But I was hoping more STAs would come on and chop it up.
Yeah, I actually got a show planned for 10 o'clock, so
Oh,
I got
cool.
to yeah, I'm going to do one more live stream where I go through the proofs that Daniel 9's fulfilled, because part of the reason why I think that's kind of important is I want to create unity in the church. So at
Yes.
least I know not everyone's going to go with it. Some people are still going to fight it, but
Oh, yeah.
um, I want to try and make a stab at, like, look, these are the simple proofs, and until a futurist can defeat these proofs, then we can maybe go on to listening to them. But until they can show these little proofs do not match up, then we probably shouldn't listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, what I've noticed is that knowledge, when we think we have an understanding of a system, it tends to kind of puff us up and we can be prideful. I would absolutely love it if we could see the body stop fighting itself and then have a solid defense against and go on the offense against the cults and the various groups. But I mean, will that ever happen? Probably not.
Well, I tell you what. After this, if someone can't come up with any good proof and they still want to teach futurism, I mean, at least I'm not going to feel bad about just going off on futurist.
Yeah.
Just being like, look, you just want to divide. You just want to be teacher. Those people that I guess want to scratch the itching ears.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would. What's a good name for them? False teachers. I know that's one good name, but
Basically, yeah, false teachers, wolves, all of them.
yeah,
Well, is it going to be an open live
yeah,
stream? Or,
yeah. I'm gonna do an open mic. I'm gonna do a little presentation for about 30 minutes, and then open up the mic.
oh, cool. Yeah, and that's going to be in like
10 p.m. about 20 minutes from now.
oh, cool. Yeah, I'll just end this and I'll hop on when you open it up.
All right, that sounds good. So,
All right, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get ready for that. So I'll catch you later. I just want to add that little piece, because to me, I think when you talk about this Kalman letter, first of all, before you even go into all that other stuff, I think if you point this out, it like they don't, because this is the whole basis they have for that 1844 prophecy to come true. Like you're relying on Ellen White, but you're also relying that they even got the right calendar. But if you can see that they lied about this, you can see that. I think what it does is it opens up enough doubt to see that they might not know what they're talking, or at least they might not know what they're talking about concerning Daniel's prophecy and how to interpret it if they can't even get this calendar right.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I always forget about it for whatever reason, but that is definitely solid, because if the ending point there is no support for that, then it's really meaningless. There's no reason for it.
And then when their beginning point looks wobbly, like you were
Yeah,
pointing out, but see, I always point out this part right here because this is something real quick. I just pointed out in less than 10 minutes. You
yeah,
know, and point that out. And then if a SDA wants to continue on in the discussion, and after they have no, because none of them will have a reply to this. I haven't encountered one. So okay, they already have no answer for having a solid end date. So let's see if they even knew what they were talking about with their beginning date. And if they start to even go on their mind like, oh, I don't have an answer for this stuff. Well, now maybe this isn't a good way to interpret it at all,
yeah, yep, yeah. I'm hoping that if he reaches out to me again and brings an elder or a pastor, you're more than welcome to hop on and join and bring up anything I forget to mention, which would be super helpful.
Yeah, I would just always keep this letter on mine and keep it open, like a tab that you can quickly reference it whenever you talk to an SDA, because I think this is one of the most critical details to point out, since it just looks like they've done so much to lie about this date having any validity.
Yes, I agree. All right, I'll close up and I'll let
All
you
right,
get
man.
to your thing.
Yeah, I'll catch you later. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. See ya.
All right, yep, later.
All right, thank you everybody for listening. Hope you have a good night, and do check out Chris Lucas, the Protestant View Live. He has a show and a open mic. It sounds like tonight's gonna be on eschatology and probably I think it's futurism is what it sounds like. So hope to see you guys there. Grace and peace to the body. God bless.